Hi, welcome back to my studio. My name's Rebecca Victoria and I'm so glad to have you here. I am a professional fine artist sharing things about motherhood, fine art, and just general life and how you can get yourself into the studio more. Today is the next part in the series called The Intersection Between Motherhood and Art, and I ended up extending this series because I've been loving it so much. So I have a question for you. Do you ever feel like creativity has to wait until life slows down? As a mom, that perfect time almost never comes, but it does not mean that your art has to disappear. What if I told you that 5 imperfect, messy, beautiful moments could be the thing that really ignites your creative passions and could really transform how you see the intersection of motherhood and art with each other, and also how you see yourself creatively, even in the midst of the motherhood chaos? So what I want to talk about today is breaking the myth that you have to abandon and stop all your creative practices as soon as you become a mother simply because you don't have the time. But for me, being a creative person doesn't mean I have to spend 5 hours down in the studio every day or more. For me, being a creative person shows up in all different elements of the world. It could be in other things outside of the studio, such as gardening, cooking, playing games with your children, but it can also be how you intentionally use all your time at home. Oh, I've got a hug button on my hand from my kid today. If you don't know this, I have a children's story and it is called The Hug Button, and it talks about separation anxiety and the transitions between the parts of our day, like home into school or home into daycare, and how we can make those a bit easier. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. It's on Amazon and it's under The Hug Button by Rebecca Victoria Rogers. Do you ever feel like your creativity has to wait until like the right moment and that you almost never get there because there's so little time in the day for these right moments? Well, then you've come to the right spot, because I believe that even though when you become a mother and you are so torn between different parts of your day, between parenting, between keeping a house, between working, maybe between everything that you have to do, that mental to-do list, that huge unburdening load, I believe that you can create art in the cracks and the margins of your day, and you don't have to give up any parts of yourself just because you've become a parent. What if I told you that 5 messy minutes of imperfect art is almost just as important as 5 hours in the studio, and you can do it even in the middle of motherhood chaos? So my goal today is to break the myth with you that art has to be this all or nothing thing, that you have to be down in the studio for 5-10 hours a day to be a real artist. And your art practice can be fluid and imperfect and flexible and portable even, and all you have to do is practice making art in the margins and the cracks of the day. I think that it's really important when you're making art, instead of valuing the quantity of time that you have with your artwork or your creativity, it's about valuing the quality of time and the intention you come into this time with, the mindset that you have when you're creating this artwork, and ultimately how creating this artwork makes you feel. I think that is one of the most important things about being an artist, how your art makes you feel and how rewarding it can be to you, and how the reasons that you're making this art and putting it out into the world and how this affects you on your day to day. So I think you really, as I said, just have to shift to quality in your art rather than quantity, and really break the myths that long hours in the studio is what's important. All you might really need is 5 minutes a day when you create artwork, and this might just be enough to keep that creativity alive for you while you're in the throes and in the really hard parts of motherhood, especially in those early newborn days when you're consumed with these snuggly little piles of skin and rolls and wrinkles, maybe you can find a couple minutes here and there to just doodle in a sketchbook or be creative in some way that you weren't planning on being. So the best way that I have found that I can do this in my life is through time blocking. Time blocking has really become this essential part of my practice, and I think it's so interesting that something as simple as setting a timer could really change how I am showing up in the studio every day. So what it is I figure out how much time I might have, or I figure out how much energy I might have, so that because I don't want to fatigue myself, and it might be in those really important moments where baby is napping and you only have a certain amount of time, or your kid's having a rest and you only just have a really small pocket of time up your sleeve. I like to set a timer and make sure that I stick to this timer. That's the bit that I find really hard, and I'm still working on that a lot. But sticking to the timer and not overworking myself, not overcommitting, and just showing up for those intentional moments. For me, I like to set a 30-minute timer. I find that a really good amount of time of painting, and I find it's so interesting. When I have a 30-minute timer, sometimes I get more done in those 30 minutes than I might get done in 2 hours of painting, because I think I have to be really intentional about how I'm showing up to the studio and the paint that I'm putting down, the colors, the textures, the brushes. Everything has to be so much more thought out and intentional, and I think that means that I end up doing a little bit more, or actually doing quite a lot more in some cases. And these limitations have actually created so much freedom in my practice. And for me, I think it takes a lot of guilt off my shoulders too, because I know that I'm showing up for my art practice even in those small moments. It's honestly feels like I've done as much as a full day's work emotionally and mentally, because I've poured a little bit into my art cup for the day, and even a little bit means that it's not on empty, and that is a great thing. So something that I like to think about too is if I had a jug of water for the day, and I have my cups, and all of my cups are my things that I have to do, and my jug of water is my time, my energy, my concentration, and everything that I can kind of conjure up to get myself to do something. And as I go throughout the day, I pour a little bit into these cups, and by the end of the day, ideally it's not completely empty. I like to have a little bit banked for the next day, but that doesn't always happen. But for me, even if I have just a little bit poured into my art, I feel like that feeds on itself, and it feels like so much more, and it feels like enough. Even those couple little drops, even a drop of a 5-minute would feel like enough. So for me, I find those micro moments of creativity so important. It could be when your child's sitting down and maybe coloring themselves, or they're really immersed in an activity and they're happily playing by themselves. That could be a time for you when maybe you would be playing on your phone or doing something unproductive, or cleaning even, because the cleaning can wait a few minutes. You could sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper and just, I don't know, write a poem out, or do a quick drawing, or just make some marks on the paper with a pencil is more than you would have done before. It's something. And those somethings all add up together, and they create a little bit a day. And that is a beautiful thing. That build up can really lead into something more down the line, but you just have to start somewhere. The other thing that I find really helpful with having these limitations is that sometimes when I'm painting and I've been painting for over an hour, I'm actually really exhausted, and I don't realize it in myself because I haven't really been checking in with my body. And so I will check in and see how I'm doing, and then I realize that I've kind of overworked the piece, and I maybe wasn't intending to work it up as much as I had in one session. So then I've left the studio feeling a little bit frustrated with myself, or dejected, and a little bit maybe unhappy with what I painted for the day. And so But what I found with time blocking is that I stop before I get to that moment where I am kind of pushing myself a little bit physically and I'm not quite present mentally anymore, and I can stop before that moment. And I think that the artwork ends up so much better in the long run because of that, because I've stopped before I'm like starting to check out but still painting. So I feel like I stop myself from overworking things a lot, and I am able to really prioritize how my body's feeling and where my body's at. And I think that really comes through in the paintings. They are worked up in layers and they are slowly evolving over time. They might take longer to do because I'm doing more slow sessions all the time, and I actually kind of love that. I find that small intentional little sessions here or there tend to work a lot better for my studio practice. And I think that really helps the artwork a lot, and it is meaning that they are ending up so much more authentic, less overworked, more rich and vibrant in colors, because I'm not even overworking my palette at all. And I'm just so much more pleased and happy when I leave the studio, because I feel like I am doing the work more service by stepping back for a moment. And I think it's really interesting how integral this time blocking has become a part of my creativity, because of motherhood. I never would have started it if I hadn't become a mother, because I wouldn't have realized how intentional I could be in 30 minutes of time over longer sessions. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing to come out of it. And these small intentional efforts have really been a way to signal to myself that I'm prioritizing me. I'm still an artist. I'm still creative. Even in the midst and the throw of the chaos of motherhood, I'm still a person, and I'm still honoring that. And I think that that's a really important message to be sending to yourself. This consistency really builds more momentum in the long run, and it's really a lot more beneficial than these occasional bigger sessions. The longer, more productive sessions over time. There were these studies done that showed that with exercising, just doing 5 minutes a day every day of the week was much more beneficial than doing 35 minutes a day in one session on a Sunday, say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Yeah, 35. They found that it was so much more beneficial than just doing, say, one 35-minute session during the week. It was way more beneficial to do those 5 minutes every day, and your body built up the muscle and the memory better. And I think it's the same with creativity. That 5 minutes of creativity that you might be able to find in a small part of your day every day, even the tiny things, I think that is more important than doing, say, a 35-minute session once a week, because I think that it's building up that creative muscle and that creative bone slowly and surely every day. And I think for me that it makes my creativity kind of breed on itself almost and overflow in a way that it would never have with just the one session, because it just builds. It's like little building blocks one at a time, and that tower is going to be stronger than if you did them the other way up. I don't think my analogy is working very well, but that's okay. Sometimes I do a little sketch during a nap. Sometimes I will sit beside my child and suggest we sketch together. Sometimes I let my kid pick a couple of colors and I say, can you create some? Basically, I ask, can you create some limitations for me? Can you pick me 3 colors? And I will create an artwork out of that quickly in my sketchbook. Or I ask if they can do a little drawing and I see what I can turn it into. That's a really fun exercise to kind of create your creative intentions going while also involving your kid with you and doing it with them. Sometimes it's just writing notes or ideas down so that they're not sitting in your head. Sometimes that's enough creativity to get out of your day. For me, I also find a gratitude journal very helpful. And I think in these hard moments, it's really just a reminding yourself that it doesn't have to be these big, intentional, huge gestures of love towards your art studio or your art practice. It can be these quick little love notes that you give yourself every day, these sticky notes that you sit up in your studio every day, the quick I love yous. They add up just as much over time, and I think they're more thoughtful in the long run. And that's what I was trying to say with the time blocking. I think that in the long run, it's more beneficial to do these tiny little stacks each day than one big at the end that might fall over because you're getting tired towards the end and you're not able to concentrate anymore. For me, I had to remind myself that my art really didn't have to wait for these intentional moments. It could live in the messy margins of life. It could be imperfect, and that is so okay, if not better. So that is what I have for you today. I hope that you found value in this little chat. I hope that I didn't repeat myself too much, and if you found this useful and you know another artist that might benefit from this, or even another mother, I would love it if you could send it to them. I would really appreciate that. Please hit the subscribe button so that you are getting any of the new videos as they come out. I am sending you so much love.